Cool. Okay, well, we are delighted today to see some cool things on our agenda. The first is just a review of what our agenda today is. It's Catherine's going to do a presentation. And we're going to talk about the video, the long dormant video, which came up. So we just put that on the agenda to discuss, and then the third one would be some additional planning for the conservation board. So I'm excited that we're doing this. We're all in person. Hooray! Except for McKendra, but that's because we fooled her. So let's see. Let me grab the agenda. Roll call. So we have myself, Michael DeChellis,
Lindsay Gannat, Emil Schaefer.
and McKendra. You're on the line, right?
McKendra Warren. Yes, I'm here.
Cool. And we have our city manager Grant is here, and Catherine, who's our AmeriCorps Vista, as an invited presenter. The first just normal thing is to approve the minutes from the December meeting, which is attached here, and I just quickly share that. So this was the application one. When we recommended McKendra, and then the city manager attended, and we talked a lot about process. And then we did talk about available information for the energy action plan discussion. Motion to approve.
You're asking for one, or you make one?
I'm asking for a motion. I make a motion to approve. How about that?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
I do have one.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is McKendra. On 7B with the I think on the third line or the second line, is it 2022, 2023, just that one? I think we're missing a number.
Yeah, you're right.
For sure.
Actually, that letter, you're asking for when that was.
Yes, I am. I was reading it and I was confused. So I thought if these were official minutes, it'd be good to have that year in there.
Before I was here, so I want to say 21. We did a final read December 2020.
That would have been 2021 then, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that was 2021. Okay, so I actually vote against my own resolution. And then anybody and McKendra, I assume you vote against that resolution. So is that true? To approve the minutes as they are?
Yes.
Okay, and then I make a motion to approve the minutes with that one edit on B to do January 2021. You want to second that motion? Second that?
Second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Okay. Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Cool. Robert's rules, fine.
Hey, someone knows him.
Next item is our honored guest.
Wonderful.
So I just like to introduce Catherine. when we talked about a resilience plan for Park County, gosh, months ago. First, that was when you were doing, I think, a lot of really cool research. I'm really glad and grateful that you're here to do a presentation, because I think that it's just the framing that you're using in order to look at resilience, I think, is really valuable for everybody on this board and in the community to see just how broad of a sort of umbrella that you're using to think through this stuff. And so I'll let you, of course, give more details about yourself. And then I'd also like to just propose that we, for this topic, just sort of suspend the Roberts order of communication. Let's just have a little bit more fluid discussion. Is that okay with everybody? I see nodding heads. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So I think that was unanimous. Yes, we'll say. So just for this item, and can we just, if you have a question, maybe just ask it as it comes up, and we'll get through it. And if there's anybody on the call that has a comment that they'd like to make, or a question, I'd like to just invite them to just jump in, and that does go for people in the room as well, so that we can just be efficient and a little bit less formal. And it's all yours.
Great, cool. Well, thank you guys for having me in to talk to you all about the work I've been doing.
Michael, are you sharing the screen? So
I'm about to. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, got it.
Oh, so we can.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, let me just share that.
I was gonna say the same thing as Michael too. Just if you have questions, shout them out or unmute yourself. Just no need to be formal for lecture, like just have a discussion.
So we're sharing the presentation view, but we're seeing the notes view on the second screen. Is that okay?
Mhm. That's the way that works. McKendra, you see the presentation, right?
Yeah, it looks really good.
I
from
do.
the
I
side.
do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sick title.
So, but this is, Catherine, this is why I didn't come watch you, so I didn't get everybody sick.
Spelled my name right in everything.
First slide's the most important.
All the
Cool.
basics.
They can hit the next slide. So yeah, a little about who I am and why I'm here. I just graduated last year and I took a position with AmeriCorps. It's a partnership with AmeriCorps and Montana Campus Compact, which is just a partnership of a bunch of universities around the state. And we're also in partnership with NCAT, Butte. And so the AmeriCorps formed a resilience cohort this year, and there are six of us across the state, pretty spread out, all doing different projects. And I myself am hosted at Park County Environmental Council, and I'm tasked with developing a community resilience campaign and plan. So you can hit the next slide. So the goal of a community resilience plan, it's a living and community developed and owned document that examines projected changes in weather patterns, identifies vulnerabilities within a variety of sectors, and lists action items that allow Park County to thrive amidst a new climate reality. And so this has just been kind of like a working definition, been adding it onto it as I've learned more about the topic, but what I want to emphasize is that it's community developed and community owned, just because I think that's the best way to get buy-in and is to have like real ownership, and that it's living. It's not like set in stone. It's meant to be addressed and reviewed to make sure it's still accurate. And then the way we hope to have it used is to be operationalized by adopting into the growth policy, which would be great because then that sets Livingston and Park County up for a lot of the funding that's coming down the pipeline with the IRA and the bill, those new federal legislation, like the federal legislation, a lot of that money you can't get unless you have a plan in place. So some key terms: resilience is just capacity of anyone or to survive, adapt, and grow with stressors and shocks. So like long time or short time setbacks, the ability to get back, and do the best as a community. And so identifying, assessing, and adapting to social, economic, ecological disruptions. Yeah, I really like this graphic because it shows why this isn't just called like an ecological plan or a climate action plan. It's a community plan, because really community resilience it's the environment, but it's as much so the economy and people. You can't have one of those in a vacuum. And then a resilience plan is made up of adaptation and mitigation strategies. So while mitigation is how you're going to prevent the impact of something, adaptation is to a degree accepting it is going to happen and making smart decisions to survive and thrive despite that. And I like this graphic. It's from the IOE, and it just shows all the different climate plans across Montana. It shows that this is a practice a lot of cities and municipalities in the state are taking, and I think it's wise to join in on that effort. And then, as well as the state, there are a lot of foundations in Livingston, specifically our growth policy, which Grant so kindly touched on yesterday, if you were present at the city commission meeting. And so goal 4.1 in the growth policy is to develop an integrated, comprehensive citywide climate action plan to prepare the economy and general population for the future. And then a subset strategy of that was a climate plan in partnership with the county. There's also foundations in the city's organizational strategic plan, though that is in the process of being revised. And so the whole context for Hark County and Livingston's community resilience plan would really rest on the science that is outlaid in the Greater Yellowstone Climate Assessment, which is a really well done document made by a partnership including Montana State University and USGS that shows the observed and projected changes for the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So thinking of it as an ecosystem rather than like a territorial area. But as you can see, from 1950 to 2018, the changes that we're seeing are increase in temperature, less snowfall, and an earlier peak stream flow, which I'm sure many of you have seen just through your day-to-day experiences. And it goes so far as to use the observed science to make projections to the end of the century, which includes warmer temperatures, more precipitation, less snow, and a decreased runoff from June to August. And so what this means in terms of scenarios, you can go on to the next. Oh, there's also, you can skip this one, just go to the next. So this, in terms of visible scenarios, more early season flooding, and then when this water is out of the mountains, followed by drought. And then the increase in the snow would have impacts to non-human events such as snow and water-based tourism, heat waves, putting those without cool spaces in danger, increased chances of wildfire, which therefore impacts air quality, and overall just more variability and unpredictability in what's going to happen.
I know for the statewide climate assessment, they had different scenarios based on different amounts of mitigation. Do you know if this one is based on like middle, worst case scenario or best case scenario?
Yes, so the GYCA does the same I think RCP 4.5, 8.5.
RCP,
Oh, it's just I don't know what it stands for off the top of my head, but it's those scenarios.
okay,
Yeah, it's
Got it.
different,
Mitigation, it's just,
cool, so
UN scenarios.
these
So-
are the numbers for,
yes, I would have to double check, but I am fairly certain I used the impacts of 4.5, which is a little bit of mitigation, just to have, it's not extreme, not one of the extremes, just
Sure.
right down the line. So, yeah, I can double check that for you.
Representative concentration pathways, so it's not very intuitive.
Oh, yeah, I remember it.
like concentration being carbon.
Probably.
I don't know, but yes, greenhouse gas. It's all
Okay,
of it,
cool.
methane.
Got it, nothing.
Yeah, I went with like the middle, just
Perfect.
most average. Yeah, so these are the projections expected for the Great Yellowstone Climate Assessment, and based on recent events that we have seen ourselves, like the June 2022 flood. This is tangible and real. And so how would we go about making a community resilience plan? What I have been following, the process kind of guideline I've been following is the Montana Resilience Framework for Communities. And it's pretty much what it boils down to is it's like a stepwise guide for community organizing. And what it has, like, starting community conversation, making a steering committee, and then working groups, identifying needs of the community and finding specific vulnerabilities, looking at current plans, finding needs and strategies, and then developing a plan. But just like without all that jargon, what it really goes down to is the next slide. Just seeing the science, engaging the community, assessing who and what's vulnerable, and then based on those vulnerabilities, making goals, strategies, and actions to help these vulnerabilities. And so these are the steps that I think that I have done well with so far. What I have been doing since I've been here is essentially just meeting with stakeholders. I think I've met with 32 different stakeholders, which you can see on the next slide. And trying to hit really all of these areas of economic, environmental, and social resilience. And so I've been interviewing these people. I don't really like to say interviewing, just having a conversation and asking what like impacts they're nervous about, what initiatives they're working on, if any, what initiatives they would like to work on. And just, yeah, trying to kind of in a more, I like one-on-one because you get more of a feel for the organization and build the relationship with the people, but just, yeah, see what vulnerabilities they're facing, and what actions they're doing, if any. And then in the meantime, also been doing a lot of literature review. And so in addition to speaking with people one-on-one, reading documents that discuss shocks and stressors in Montana, as well as Livingston and Park County.
Just looking at-
And then I've also been looking at the existing community plans just to see like what work's already being done or trying not to overlap with the goals and the contents of existing planning, to be deliberate and really focus on making the community resilience plan its own plan. And where I'd like to go going forwards, I think I've done a good job of really getting to know the outlined science and the GYCA and talking with stakeholders, but I'd like to move forward into forming a steering committee that could then make this work able to be done by more people and exist outside of my own work. I think engaging the community is just an ongoing step. There's always more people to talk to, more voices to include. So that's something that I intend to do throughout this whole process. And then once the steering committee is formed, I can move on to like really identifying resilience needs and developing a plan. So, yeah. and the
Can I ask
Montana
a-
Resilience-
Can I ask
Oh,
a
yeah.
quick?
go for it.
Oh, actually, you're about to answer it. That was gonna be my question.
Yeah. So the areas of steering committee, the framework document puts 5, which is business, government, health, ecology, and just informed citizens. I think that's a good start, but what I'd like to see is those 5 plus 2 more, which are energy, utility, and then agriculture. I think that, I mean, I'm open that if people think there are more sectors than that or anything I'm missing, I always want to include more voices, but that's what I think a good start has been, and where by just meeting with like these 30+ people, where I think the kind of buckets fall into. Does that answer your question? I'll take that as a yes.
McKendra, did that answer your question?
I guess my question was more like, how do you find these people and choose who they are? Because I think quite a few people fall into these buckets. So how do you make sure it's well-rounded?
Yeah, my answer to that would, I think that's a good question. Yeah, my answer is just from having these stakeholder meetings and speaking with people. I think I get a sense of who is really interested in the work, as well as who kind of gets the goals and the vision of the project. And then that's how I would like to build it, is by like inviting people who really are on board to be part of the steering committee.
It's pretty open.
It's very open, yeah.
Who's willing?
Coalition of the willing.
Yeah.
History's made by people who show up,
Yeah.
right? Like that's I also the thought that by creating a list like this of intention, this is almost like an action list of people to go and invite and make sure that they know that this is what's going on, that this is what you're trying to do, this is what you're trying to put together. Yeah, I just had a couple comments on this. I think that especially, you know, everybody's busy, right? So, I mean, the people that are going to show up are the ones that are going to be really interested and passionate. That are gonna, or the ones that are gonna have some kind of a, you know, financial stake in the output. Or in the case of, you know, elected officials and others, it's whatever their boss tells them to do, you know, whether it's the general public, if they're an elected official, or if it's a staff member, it's, you know, it's just what they're told to do. So that it's, those are 3 different approaches.
What's your timeline, both for like your service term and when you hope to assemble the steering committee and accomplish your goals?
It's a great question. So my service term goes until August. So I would love to stay around longer than that, if at all possible. And the steering committee, I want to form pretty much as soon as possible. And as soon as I get what I think is a full picture of individuals who are dedicated, excited, and cover a full kind of field of like each area that I think is important, that like we think is important. Great.
And we're hoping that this program will continue annually
Okay, great.
around resilience.
In the resilience class,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and as I said, I think engaging the community is just a practice that needs to be continued throughout this whole process. There's always more voices, and it's not my plan or a future Vista's plan, it's Park County and Livingston's plan. So the way that I think this can be done is by continuing interviews or conversations, one-on-ones. I would also like to do kind of community cafes in each area of Park County where we invite people to come and then set up like certain questions, like the questions I've been asking stakeholders at tables and get people to talk about them and write down the answers. And then through Park County Environmental Council, the organization that hosts me, they have community conversations via Zoom. And I've had Kate French from the Blue Green Alliance agree that she's willing to come to one of those and speak because she is really an expert on how funding in the IRA and the bill connect to like city documents, as well as connecting that back to what to include in those city documents in order to set yourself up best for funding. And then another medium in which to engage the community is to have the steering committee and working groups come together in a workshop in which they identify vulnerabilities. And then means such as tonight at the conservation board is getting public input and making it a community owned process. And so this is another one of the steps in the Montana framework. And this is really one that gets completed, I think, once the steering committee and working groups are out there. But what I can tell is themes I've seen so far, just from speaking with people when it comes to community resilience, are floodplain and river health, wildfire preparation, building stronger relationships throughout the community, and housing. And part of housing would be economic inequality. And then this is our last two steps, is that developing the plan, implementing it and assessing it. And this is a graphic from the, I believe it's the Blackfeet environmental plan. And I really like it because it shows that even once this plan were to be published, it's not just like shelved, it's living. You plan, like develop the plan, act on it, see what actions are working or not working, and adjust from there. So I've included some examples of what completed plans look like. I think the Blackfeet plan is a very strong one. They divided into sectors, both human and non-human, and these sectors are chosen based on vulnerability, which is how much they think the system could be harmed from climate impacts. And then for each sector, they introduce it, put the observed and expected impacts, assess via some like scientific means how they know these expected impacts. And then they develop adaptation strategies for the impacts, which include overall goals, sub-strategies, and individual action items, which is like, what's the result we want? How are we going to get there? What's like small steps are we going to take? And then they go even further to identify potential partners and funding sources to make it really achievable. And then another strong one is Climate Ready Missoula, which is out of Missoula, obviously, and they were developed more of a grassroots bottom-up approach where they had workshops of where many stakeholders came together. The first workshop, they just presented the scenarios, like which would be similar to the ones in the Greater Yellowstone Climate Assessment I talked about, and asked like who and what are not is vulnerable. That was like the whole workshop, just getting those vulnerabilities identified, and then they reconvened. And in the first workshop, the stakeholders were by sector, and then they kind of shuffled it up and asked like, what are some solutions? And so from this, they got 29 goals with 77 action items.
What was the format? You said there was a, did you see what they used? It was a sector-based brainstorming, so they basically broke it down like these management sectors, for example, from the Blackfeet one, maybe,
Yes.
and then had brainstorming sessions related to.
Yeah, exactly. They did it by, I spoke with the woman who helped develop that plan. They did it by like energy, health, in kind of the silos the first time, and then the second one, it was kind of mixed up and developing solutions. And here's an example of kind of what those goals, so I like this organization strategy. On the left, you have the sector, which is one is business, rec, and tourism. Across, you have goals, and then under the goals, individual action items. This one, they're mostly talking about individual action items, ways to diversify tourism economy, given the scenarios they're looking at. And so Sarah and myself have developed a draft outline that kind of is, we like to use as a visualization tool to see what could a Park County community resilience plan look like. So we're welcome to go through that.
Yeah.
If not, we can just
No,
ask
I-
questions and talk about how we could partner.
That's, I'd like to talk about that first before we go. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Catherine, before we go through the draft outline, because I think the outline's awesome and really cool and a really good springboard for ideas. Is that okay, though? I'd like to chat through like some of the specifics maybe of how this implementation and this plan could work, and really like how you envision us being able to help. I mean, what's the path from turning this from the Catherine plan to the the plan of the community, how do we turn this into a real we that we've gotten all the buy-in from and the input from others, and what does that look like and what do you need?
definitely. So I think that Grant may know better about how, like, Grant and yourself and all of you will know better about the specifics of how the conservation board and myself can work together. But the reality of it is I have time, I have 40 hours a week to focus just on this. Whereas conservation board, it's like, okay, you can, once a month and get an hour's work done. So I think it would be useful time for me to continue on working on this, but I think having individuals, if any individuals have specific expertise or time, are really excited about it and want to either form working groups or be involved in working groups, that would be awesome. So I can think of the moment. Do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, I think kind of looking at the outline, in the coming moments probably would shed light on if any of the board members would have interest in that. But I think having a higher level conversation here about, the outline and ideas and possible goals and things you'd like to see in it, I think would be good here. And then, if, to the extent anyone on the board has time or interest in working, and then maybe you could come back in next month or 2 months or something and kind of give an update on where you are, and we'll just kind of track it that way.
Totally. Yeah, I'm always happy to have input and outlines torn apart and come and give, progress reports, whatever needed.
I think I'd be interested in also just what, at what point, because this process, one of the specific things I think that was the steering committee thing. I really understand why that's part of this process pretty early on, right? Because the challenge with community engagement processes is that you really need to bring everybody along the whole way, or everything kind of can fall apart at the end. And so I think I was just curious in particular on that, like what level of help do you need right now in getting a steering committee together? I mean, for example, we're an advisory board for the city commission of Livingston. If you need a city representative officially as part of a steering committee, we could recommend, for example, to the commission that they appoint one, or that they tell the city manager to appoint one, or whatever the process should be. Do you think that you're at the point where we should consider such a recommendation?
Definitely, yes, that'd be great.
So I think that would be maybe a goal for the next time we talk, is what the specifics of that recommendation would be. Because unless you want to try to work them out right now, but I guess that, there's going to be some questions, some very specific questions, I think, like how much of a time commitment is this? What's the meeting, what's the meeting frequency, all that kind of stuff kind of needs to be known for the commission to make an informed decision on whether that's, something to commit resources to.
Definitely. Yeah, let's nail down exactly time commitment and duties and get someone in that.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
So maybe the next time we talk, you bring what those specifics are. And then then we can just, consider such a resolution. Any other comments?
We've had a really hard time getting a youth member on this board, but I'm curious if, I don't know what time of day the steering committee meetings are going to be, or if it makes sense to have a youth representative on the steering committee as well. I thought one more way to bring diversity.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's maybe a whole nother category,
Mhm.
truthfully.
Now that you bring it up, I've definitely had somebody else suggest that. But yeah, I think that's a worthy thing to look into.
And maybe youth is like under 30, maybe, I don't know how you want to define it, but let's just see. Right.
That's right.
She goes to the green initiative quite often.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
And we have
Right.
Alicia.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Alicia, which one of your kids can you steal?
She's helping support a climate summit.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Other areas.
I actually talked about the youth position on your committee today. And the biggest feedback I got from it was that a 2-year commitment is really hard for them. And so
Yeah.
that's why, yeah.
Yeah,
Because we went through like the application and everything, and I've gone through it a couple of, and so that's just what I was like, they just didn't want to commit to 2 years yet.
Yeah, Alicia, thanks. We'll have to talk offline about that. I think I would love to change our bylaws immediately to support whatever they need,
Yeah.
to feel comfortable with that. But that's an aside. Anybody else, just on like that process piece, Pam or Kendra, or I mean, anything like,
I think I have one thing, and I will be there in person next time, and it's very awkward to be the only person on Zoom. I think I heard Catherine say that her time is up in August. Was that right? And so
That's right.
I guess my question is, what is the timeline for needing the steering committee? because if we want her to come back and we have a couple of people in mind to suggest, like, is that next month? Is that 2 months? And then all of a sudden, we're in March, April. So just wondering about the timeline.
Yeah, I think I addressed that a little earlier, but, yeah, just, I think as soon as possible, would be great.
Yeah. Well, we have a meeting next month. And we can, we really can have just like other one-offs if we need to support different timelines that's required, right? I mean, especially if they're short. I think the other thing from a process perspective that's that I just am curious about is, and I thought it was very sage and wise of you to show the different plans that are out there that are specifically being worked on here in Park County, related to resilience and disaster preparedness and that sort of thing, which may have some Venn diagram overlap with some of the things that a resilience plan would touch on. And I think my question is sort of strategically, is the resilience plan going to be the way that this community is going to express things like disaster preparedness and even an energy action plan and other things? Is that the label that we're going to use for those kind of actions out of our strategic plan and out of our, frankly, at least for the conservation board, literally in our bylaws? Is that the name of the output that checks that box? And I'm just curious, because I think that do you feel like you've had enough conversations to know that yes, that's the case? Or do we need to be kind of working that one too? I mean, I think it's wise not to try to, duplicate effort. Yeah, what comments? I'm kind of looking at Grant here.
Well, I certainly, I'll say after my initial conversations with Catherine, I thought it was an opportunity to accomplish a lot of the goals in the growth policy. That said, Catherine doesn't work for the city. Catherine's, got a scope of work and a mission and all of that is lies elsewhere. So I'm interested to see what the outline concept that you're working with is, that she's working with, is to see just how much of the strategies in the growth policy are addressed there. But I recognize that her charge is much larger than the city of Livingston. And so if there is a greater level of detail that's required in an energy action plan, for instance, the city's certainly prepared to go that way. I would say also a lot of that, just disaster planning and kind of response and recovery work does also sit with some other groups within the city of Livingston, right?
Yeah.
I mean, fire and rescue being one of the biggest. And so, again, if that fits with your charge, it seems like that might be a little bit of a bigger thing than you were intending to bite off. But I'd be happy to work, some of our disaster response efforts into this and planning into this.
Well, I think in particular, that's wise, because I do think in particular, and that's why, like you, I was really excited to do this outline review, even though, it's not obviously done in any way, but it's also helpful because it helps align the plan that you're working on to real planning needs in the community. And so there may be an opportunity to align some of those areas and just make sure that they're lined up with the emergency preparedness and all that stuff as well, so that they're sort of plug and play. you know, please see this thing over here for this whole section kind of thing. And it could be a way to make it more of a inclusive, unifying document. So, and then maybe one that doesn't require reinvention the wheel or getting a whole bunch of pre-approval just to continue to charge forward, because nobody wants to slow you down. My gosh, like it's fantastic.
Yeah, I can address that. I think that that's why I've been really focusing on looking at the other plans that do exist.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, the disaster recovery and that all sits with the Office of Emergency Management, that hazard mitigation plans, 7-page plan that's like has that down to a T. And as far as I think mitigation, that more fits with an energy action plan, but where this plan I think rests and fills the gap is with adaptation, adapting to all of those projected impacts across the sectors that have that environmental, social, and economic overlap. And I'm totally happy to just have action items be, go see like this resource, go see this resource. Yeah, I think that's how it fits in the best.
Well, the other piece that to me is so attractive is and it was called out last night in the city commission meeting, those sort of the grant, like chasing grants, you know, the entrepreneurial idea of we're a small community, we don't have a great tax base, you know, resilience projects we won't be able to necessarily do much with. But we sure can get a pen out and write grant applications. And if a resilience plan helps us specifically with that, then that's worth a ton of time and effort to make sure that it's aligned with those other plans. So, okay, well, does that, any other comments on that in terms of process?
Not at the moment. I'm sure I will have some.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's open.
Is the conservation board in a position to also provide initial recommendations that would be useful? I think about the initiation of the growth policy and how boards and committees provided recommendations, what would be important by doing a review of other climate action plans, for instance. Just saying what would be useful conversations, steering committee groups, etc. And I don't know, just to maybe add on to expedite her timeline too. If we're waiting month for month, then it's just an update and feedback at that time, or is there a little bit more that the conservation board wants to provide and help guide her and what this final document might present?
Sorry, I'm not in the room again. Can someone, she's a little bit too far away from the microphone. Could someone tell me what that question was?
Yeah, McKendra, sorry.
Thank you.
That was Sarah Stans, who's in the audience, and we spoke up about having the the idea of how could we help to provide. Sit down.
Can we go closer?
Yeah, sit down closer.
Hey, Sarah, we've met. Nice to see you again.
Hear you.
Or yeah, hear me again.
Just how do we provide from a conservation board standpoint support to the effort, either giving the example of the growth policy and how we provided a lot of input that was very specific to the growth policy to the planning board when they were working on that, and asking for sort of similar review and input just to start just increasing the quality of the output. And I think well, so from my perspective, the answer is yes, sure. I mean, that's part of what we're doing today, right? We're gonna quickly, as soon as we get off the process discussion, we'll jump into the outline. But I think that we have an opportunity to do that. I know that Grant mentioned that if there are topics that specific board members want to jump in on, I think that's another opportunity. The only thing that we have to watch out for that maybe that you don't is that if we all start talking together, it's a public meeting, right? So it makes it actually a little awkward to contribute. If we want to do it individually, I think that's probably something that if you can run that process, we could actually do that. As long as we're not all collaborating on the same topics. If you need that.
Sorry, what's your quorum size? Are you a 4-person board or 5-person board?
Well, right,
now.
we are currently as of yesterday, we are a 4-person board.
Okay.
And we have we're gonna have one available, so our quorum size will be 2. Which is really awkward.
No, as a
It's
4-person,
majority.
your
Is it a
quorum
majority
3.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah, your quorum's
Yeah.
3 and 4-person.
Quorum's
board.
3, okay. So 3. So 2 people can work on something and contribute together, but as we go through the topics, there may be an opportunity just to have topical separation, right? Which would be another way to get around that, not just technically, but in spirit. We don't need to have any offline collaboration of everybody. So that's the only, that's just the kind of asterisk there, is that if people do want to contribute, between meetings and things like that, just please don't start a conversation with all of us at once.
Yeah.
Make
Yeah,
sure
I'm
you
aware
get
of that.
our input on which ones, who's gonna be able to contribute on what. And then just have offline, one-on-ones or 2-on-1s at the most.
Yes, I think what the conservation board can best offer is, the individual contributions to areas, if there's interest there. The steering committee member, recommendations in general of people to reach out to and talk to. And like progress reports where I bring, this is the outline so far in public meeting setting, just like tear it apart. So
Yeah,
I think that's the best way to go forwards.
okay. Can I add something to your list then on that? I think that if you, that steering committee formation is pretty important, and, at some point, getting help around the community to go and convince people to do it, especially in places that you may be weak. Or that the steering committee may not have adequate representation, whatever that might be. Yeah, especially from a county perspective, like ag would definitely be. That could be a whole separate strategic discussion. I saw you had engaged with WSE and looked like I saw Barney Creek's logo up there. That's a good start. There's also though some pretty, like, for ag engagement, which is super crucial, especially with reduction in water in the next decades. I think, and it's big of a part of our both economy and our sort of heart and ethos in Park County that ag is. It's talking about ways to engage on that are a really good idea. So that's specifically, that's something at kind of the formation phase. That's maybe just a very specific thing that you could get help from. And I just, I'll definitely be thinking about it and offer up any help I can provide for that too. That's an interest of mine.
Great, thank you.
Okay, shall we move to the outline?
Sure. So I think that for the sake of time and efficiency, what you want to drag down to in the outline is where we have recommendations, and then under the recommendations, we have like the sectors listed so far. Those are the areas.
link in the presentation wasn't working. It'll work through this though. Yep. Yeah, it's working. Okay, so I will share this.
Is this what, I was looking on the PCEC website, or is it posted anywhere, or is it just an internal doc right now?
It's just,
Yeah.
it's in the very working stage, so it's internal at the moment.
We're open.
Oh, I mean, this is public now. We will have a snapshot of this that'll be attached to the meeting minutes for this meeting. So if that's something that you really just don't want out there yet. I just couldn't see that being honestly much of a problem, you know. We can put right at the top, like early draft or something like that, so that if you're nervous about showing a very early, you know, brain dump to the public and trying to, you know, and worried about critical feedback or something, we'll just make sure there's a giant, you know.
I think a primary purpose of this, of her work, is
Yeah.
really to start a consolidated conversation around resilience.
Yeah.
What does it mean? A lot of people want to say like disaster response, you know, but that's our friends here at emergency services. And
Yeah.
so it's really like expanding that idea and like
Yeah.
who's around the table, who's interested, finding gaps. And so if this presents an opportunity for people to jump in and be critical, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's my position on that. It shows our holes in our work. No, I fully endorse attacking it.
Cool, it's attack. Okay, so, McKendra, you can see this, right? And Alicia.
I can, thanks.
So what would you like to jump down to?
You can keep scrolling, actually, it's good.
So this is, so to update, so you just do an executive summary, of course, there'll be a bunch of definitions and acronyms, get everybody on the same page. An overview of the methodology that you just presented to us. Cool. Document review.
Local resilience initiatives is a good heading. Sorry.
Yeah.
And this is everybody that she's engaged with
I'm gonna
and people that are
increase
working on initiatives and aspects of resilience. So it's a consolidation of what's happening locally. I thought that was, it really provides the context for a Park County context. Rather than doing document review, and it's getting into the meat of local context.
Do you, yeah, so then this section goes to sort of, so after giving kind of an overview. Of all that. Then you're very specifically jumping into, here are the climate hazards.
Yes, that'd be a written version of what I said verbally earlier. There's the data, but then, you know, data is kind of, you can't just dump a bunch of data in there. That's will get people to immediately disengage. And so putting those projected impacts like into scenarios. So instead of being like 2.3 degrees warmer, like warmer temperatures can look like this for Park County. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Just wondering from that perspective. I mean, because this is really, I mean, the focus and the scope of this is clearly climate resilience. I was just wondering if that should just kind of be front and center from the beginning.
That's a question I've wrestled with for the last, 6 months or so. I just think that climate resilience can take out those impacts of the climate on economies and on people. And so every time I kind of wrestle with that, I keep coming back to community resilience.
Mhm.
But I totally, like, I see what you're saying, and I'm open to that kind of discussion if other people have the same opinion.
Well, because I mean, it's just. I mean, the challenge is that if you just say it's a resilience plan. You know, I mean, oh my gosh. Well, and then, you know, truly, you know, there are many ills that could affect this community. You know, that are not climate related.
That's true. Well, yeah, I guess the impacts, I was thinking of the impacts on instead of the impacts from. And then
Yeah.
the impacts from it is climate resilience, so
Yeah,
I'm open to that.
that's just something, any other comments on that? Cause I just don't wanna. I mean, it's a very focused thing. It focuses on climate, but you know, the reality is that if our currency collapses, or if we get into nuclear war, or, you know, I mean, there's a million other.
Another COVID.
Or another public health thing. I mean, you know, really, truly, like, those are the kinds of things that could also be considered in a resilience plan. That would also just blow the scope beyond to something that would just be truly, you know, mind numbing.
Yeah.
But so if there's a way to, because I agree with you, I think that when you say climate, people say, okay, well, you know, electric cars and solar panels, you know, and like,
Yeah.
no, it's not, you know, that's just kind of a comment.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, in my own, with myself and with people I've spoken to so far, since this is kind of in the working phases, we've honestly flip flop through like community resilience, climate action. Those are all up there, so I'm not married to community resilience.
We defer to the steering committee.
Yeah, I mean, also that, I mean, the elephant is that it also presupposes that you think that the climate is changing and it's a crisis worth adapting to. So, and
yes.
that's something that makes it. And that truthfully, I don't know what I don't know how bought in everybody is here on that. I don't know what the percentages are. I don't know any of that stuff. So.
Could call it extreme weather events. That's how they frame it. At a higher level agencies at the Flood Symposium.
Mhm.
No one said climate. The drought is included in that. It's an extreme weather event.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a really wise approach, because then it just doesn't, you know, because extreme weather events will happen almost guaranteed, no matter what, you know, it's just the history tells us that. Anyway, it's just a comment.
It's a good comment.
According to the public health demographics data of 2022, I think it's 57% were concerned about climate, but I'd have to double check that.
That's here in Park County.
Yeah.
Is that from,
Casper Department of Public Health.
is that from Yale?
Casper. Oh, is it?
It's just
It's state. Which one? That one?
Are you thinking what we name it might affect how we recruit for the steering committee or?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes,
I agree.
and that's
Yeah.
why we
Yeah.
kept it as this title, is to be inclusive of folks who would buy in via the what it affects, not what is affecting certain areas.
Well, and it changes, but and it's not just like it's not like optics or any of that stuff, it's actual belief. I mean, if you're sitting there in a space that says, I would like to address extreme weather events in my community and having resilience to that, I think that's a conversation that a lot of people can get behind, no matter where they're coming from. But if you say, you know, we have a climate crisis on our hands, and that climate crisis is you know, as a result of the oil industry and, you know, like that's the kind of sort of polarized engagement that you start with if you say if you start using that language. And I think that it's not just about what's said in the document, it's about how the members of the steering committee show up. Like what they show up with will absolutely float or sink this effort. And I think it's wiser to show up with an extreme weather resiliency perspective than and actually represent it that way to yourself, not just to the, it's not a PC stunt, it's how you approach the problem. So what do you want us to look at in terms of topics? So that we can.
Oh, yeah, you can keep going for topics.
Ahead.
So this is
Cool.
sectors.
I've noticed that there's a lot of like agriculture's there, food and water are there. But food isn't mentioned specifically. And I think looking at the food system as a whole and how much of that activity is happening in the city and county is really essential to resilience. And so that might shape the steering committee or just how priorities are organized.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's totally a huge aspect of resilience. Because, yeah, having a drought or a flood to knock out where you could get your food totally impacts being resilient.
Yeah, I guess basic needs in general, water, clean water,
Yeah,
food supply chain.
yeah. Sustainable, healthy and resilient food and water systems.
Yeah, I think so far context within food I've talked to so far is just like the food resource center. So if you have any other recommendations there. And farm school, yeah.
Good. Good. And Barney Creek, keep that food.
I was laughing because there's another Michael DeChellis that has a lot, works a lot on that stuff. You mentioned Helena specifically right now, is working with Helena on their community food system plan.
Yeah, Arrow. Town and country.
Yeah. And any producers, especially food producers, and there's not many. I mean, there's a lot of beef. But there's not a lot of other producers.
But the LFRC has like food businesses too, right? Who are processing and entrepreneurs. Yeah. Ranchers are, what is it? The only nonprofit meat, federally inspected meat processor in the country.
Right.
Right off the exit.
Donation only.
They do 1 pound ground beef for food banks and pantries, actually for Montana Food Bank Network.
I mean, they're not set up with the.
Yes.
So-
It's both, it's mixed, not a, some people pay, some people.
So we got food, as maybe another one to consider as a major heading. So in terms of ecology, you've got water here with flood and drought. And all the implications that come from that. And then wildfire air quality. I don't see health. Oh, I do see health. Sorry, there it is. So a lot of that stuff will sort of. Thus it follows, right? So if you say, okay. Which is actually something to maybe consider, that the health sector is a lens that I think is pretty important from a resilience perspective. And frankly, it plugs into, I think, some of the stuff that others in the community are working on in a pretty major way. And so I think it would be helpful to add health as a whole sector.
Oh, yeah.
because, you know, and if you think that B here is kind of like the major heading that allows that, that's great. I just want to make sure that that's,
Yeah, that's what that's intended to be.
yeah. So. So it's like energy, for example.
Mhm. Yeah, that needs to be, I think, a conversation board, conservation board myself. With Grant Granger, yeah, if we want energy to be like an energy action plan as part of a community resilience plan, if it's separate. And that would determine if it's just, if it's trying to reduce greenhouse gases, or if it's just more of a individual level promoting resilience and energy.
And that, those are the conversations I think that the steering committee would have, right? Is, how's this suss out, I suppose? I mean, would you want, say, the conservation board to, like, with a resilience lens, say, here are the major energy. Yeah, I mean, we can leverage other energy action plans and things like that and contribute to that specifically. Or, and this is to the conservation board, do we want to have somebody work with our 40-hour-a-week helper here to put together, do essentially that research under that topic and actually, you know, dive down into it, and then the board discuss what comes out of that. So the arrow direction is different there.
Like which priorities under energy?
Mhm.
It's my understanding that kind of the basis is already done for that, like what are the priorities? We
Yeah.
have a very recent thorough greenhouse gas assessment, done by Alexis, who is a former Vista. And so if someone from the conservation board wanted, yeah, to kind of take ownership of that and work with me of reaching out to people in those biggest emitters, then it could be included in this document. Or this document, if that is a separate effort, this document could say reference energy action plan. So yeah, those are two possibilities.
Can I ask a point of clarification? Because I'm just trying to get the energy action plan kind of purpose aligned with this. And if we're looking at extreme weather hazards, this is more of an adaptation. So we're looking more like at our vulnerabilities to our energy system. So we're looking at supply, right? And our impacts to our most vulnerable population. And an energy action plan from the city, I see more of a mitigation strategy rather than an adaptation strategy. So it's how are we reducing our greenhouse gases? How are we converting to more energy independence? How are we providing incentives for our residents? Does that make, so it almost feels that the energy action plan would be a recommendation of the adaptation plan. So the energy action plan would be almost substantiated by the vulnerabilities that are extracted from the resilience plan.
That makes absolute sense. I
Does
was
that make
on
sense?
the same track and
Okay.
paraphrased it really well.
And it overlaps already with the strategies from the growth policy
Okay.
and other, like, which presumably will be coming down the pike for us to consider soon as well.
Okay.
So I think there'll be an overlap at some point.
This is,
Yeah, so somebody, if I go back to your question, is it like somebody from the conservation board who understands energy and energy systems from the city level, and she's working with a Park County co-op person who's going to be on the steering committee. So who in the city is that best person to help us assess the vulnerabilities that we need to do? Yes. Yes. I think.
No, you're right, like energy action is more mitigation rather than adaptation. So I think it would be more effective to have it be its own plan. However, I have seen plans that do both, like for example, Bozeman's, I think does both.
Okay.
So,
Because they have
Both
one
options.
climate action plan.
yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive that.
And resiliency is like under that umbrella.
Or energy is under that as well, which,
So can you repeat your question?
in what ways does the Bozeman plan do both adaptation and mitigation? Is it specific to energy?
Yes, they have adaptation goals and mitigation goals as both within their plan, and energy fits more with mitigation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some overlap. That's the reason it gets confusing. So, you know, the way you make a resilient energy system, for example, is distributed generation. That's one way to do it. And robust overlapping, you know, multimodal backups and other things into the system. You make a community more resilient, especially in the case of a disaster. If everybody gets, you know, 9 tubes of caulk and goes and caulks up their houses so that they don't use as much energy all at the same time. So that you have a lot less energy needed, especially when it's scarce during a disaster or during long periods of, you know, high cost energy or something like that. And so there's a bit of a Venn diagram there, and it's things that are adaptation versus mitigation sometimes have the same solutions. And I think that's why it gets a little confusing. It's specifically in the energy topic. But that said, like, I tend to agree, like, I don't think that there's a lot of things from an energy action perspective that the conservation board can keep moving with right now. That wouldn't need even the basis of an adaptation plan, really. But could certainly plug into as part of an adaptation plan because of a lot of those overlaps.
Yeah, and I just double checked the Bozeman plan. What I said was correct. It separates resiliency goals, mitigation goals. And then the mitigation goals are things such as like reducing emissions by X%.
Yeah. So what do we do? I mean, well, first of all, what does everybody think about some of the outlying top? Is there anything specifically we want to suggest? And is there anything that's really jumping out of the page at any of the conservation board members that they want to be really engaged with potentially moving forward? So those are 2 questions.
You know, I'm not a member of the board, but when I look at items 8, 9, wastewater, solid waste, I wonder if those maybe should be kind of consolidated in just like utilities, or even if that flows up into local government, it just becomes like local services or something. And if that's the case, I would also just point out, we have water up top under the ecology section, but we might actually want to have a water kind of in that solid wastewater, just, you know, the drinking, the potable water, you know, the utility water. But again, I don't know if you just want to collapse all that into like local services or utilities or something.
Yeah, the reason I did that is because if you look at the greenhouse gas inventory, by far and away, the 2 largest emitters are solid waste and wastewater.
It's always
So that's
wastewater.
why I just
Absolutely.
put those as bullet points, but if
Well,
you
I-
wanted to just collapse that as utilities, that works.
Yeah, I did want to make a comment on that, though. I mean, you know, Alexis did an incredible job of doing that inventory. That inventory is specifically for government
Yes, yeah,
consumption, right?
totally.
So that's not even a Livingston community-wide survey. And that was a reasonable approach for her because it was a scope problem. But that's specifically what the city government and the things that the city has control over directly can do.
Yeah, I'm aware of that,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is a scope issue. It's not really a human effort to gauge the energy output of every single person.
Yeah, and there are ways, yeah. So in terms of a heading thing, maybe like, Grant, to your point, drinking water, or just anything that's a utility or city or services like level thing, even at the county level in your case too. Could be useful. Local government, why, I was curious why this was its own sort of sector. Is it because of that type of thing?
Yeah, there's just supposed to be subsections of local government. That's a formatting error on my part.
Oh, all places are.
So that all falls
The
under.
buildings, transportation, wastewater, solid waste are all under local government, but I uninvented at one point.
Well, I think that's actually a happy mistake, because when I look at specific resilience, transportation, for example, I mean, there are so many funds available right now for EV chargers, for example, and electric cars are able to be supplied energy from any source that can create electricity. For example, well, that's a resilient community. If you have a bunch of electric vehicles driving around, especially emergency service vehicles and things like that, because you can charge from any source. You're not reliant on just refined gasoline as our source of transportation energy. So I think that should definitely be a major heading. But then maybe under local government specifically, there's another, subheading, this like transportation or something.
You also brought up a good point. She's consolidating a lot of resources, grants, for instance, which would be
Yes.
a lovely part of the appendix for something like this, if you come across anything. She has the capacity to like put all that together, so that would be.
Yeah, I have a
Interesting.
running Excel sheet of grants that I think are applicable to like any of these areas.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's, okay, so any other input on this outline? Are there any major topics that are missing besides what we discussed already?
I'm gonna definitely look at this again after the meeting, since it's the first time we're all seeing it, digest a little
I'd also,
more.
if you have the time, I'd really suggest looking at some of the plan, like, similar plans, either the two I listed, in my slides, or I'm happy to share many more.
Yeah, everyone will get PDF copies of the slides and the document, the next day.
And those two plans are the Blackfeet climate change adaptation plan, and what's the other one?
It's called climate ready Missoula. Oh, yeah.
That sounds right.
Climate ready Missoula. I think climate ready Missoula is really representative of what we have the capacity to do here in Livingston Park County. Just doing more of a bottom up effort where it's getting people together, speaking, and just, getting people together, talking it through, identifying the vulnerabilities just by brainstorming, and then identifying action items by brainstorming.
Yeah, the Blackfeet had paid consultants.
That was tasked with.
Yeah.
Helping to put this thing all together.
Right.
Yeah, so that's another piece. Like, I don't, this is a lot. I mean, there's a lot of work involved here,
Oh, yeah, it's just a start.
and
Can you go back to how you had mentioned like implementation or adopting it into the growth policy? Like, was that part of?
Yeah, that's how I think it could be best operationalized, like how the housing action plan was independently developed and then adopted. I think that would be,
And if that happened, like, do you have a vision for like a time frame on how often it would be, like annually, or how it would be revisited, or first and second?
no, that's one of the items I put down at the bottom of implementation. That's something that needs to be established.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd offer, if it does become adopted as part of the growth policy or as an appendix or whatnot, we're supposed to update that every 5 years.
Okay, so at a minimum.
Yeah.
Because obviously that would take people and time to revisit annually. I didn't know if that had been factored in yet.
But would that become the work of the city commission if it's adopted as an appendix?
It may very well become the, the next time or when we go to update the growth policy, then we would, assess the work that's been done and then, have this larger community engagement process. So very likely that would end up, falling into that workflow, but I don't want to co-opt anyone's work here, just the same as the housing action plan. I mean, there's a whole community constituency that, drove that effort. So I would envision we would work with those people again.
so from a resource perspective, it was directed at you, Grant, from a resource perspective, looking at the available resources, we have this cool start on this is like an incredible organizing effort, especially that you're doing, Catherine. Thank you for coming to this community and doing this work for us. It is wonderful. Looking at these topics and thinking about them. I mean, even this for me is so helpful just to sit and review this stuff and continue to be reminded of all the different things that we need to consider. And it certainly lights a fire under me to say, oh yeah, there's a lot of work that we need to do so that the next thing is something that we can handle gracefully. I just wonder the conservation board, I think there's still quite a bit of need to put together something per the growth policy, per our strategic plan. We've been using the label energy action plan. There's probably a bunch of topics in an energy action plan that are related to things in this thing, but other things as well, as we alluded to. What is our resource level for putting this together? Because it could guide how we engage with this, right? Like if there's an opportunity to go and like what Sarah mentioned, I think that they had, or I guess you did, Catherine, that the Blackfeet Nation had a paid consultant to put this thing together. They probably got a grant to do that. I think that, having somebody that's focused on an energy action plan for the next 6 months, for example, that's on city staff, or city county borrowed somebody that's working on that, would really just move that ahead and it would make it work. What do we need in order to try to do that?
Well, it does, I don't want to make too many assumptions, but it does sound like we've hit a point perhaps where maybe there's been a realization that the energy action plan is separate from.
Sounds like it.
work. Okay, just clarifying
There's
that.
just so much that goes into it.
Yeah, that was kind of my initial, but I didn't want to
Yeah.
come into this. Yeah. So then I would say, we keep working with Catherine if that's something that you folks want to, and something that you want to do on the resiliency plan. And then I think I've worked to address the energy action plan probably through the budget and get funds appropriated for that, so we can bring on some support and a team for that. If you if you folks think that that is outside of the board's capabilities, as a separate effort from this, so I envision it as a separate effort from this, just based on the conversation. And so if you folks think that it is outside of, your capacity as a volunteer board, which I understand, then I will pursue it through the budget process.
I think what we're lacking in an energy action plan, to answer that, is like the scope. We never got like how much of what the scope of an energy action plan would be. Is a big part of answering.
Okay, so no, fantastic. I don't know if you saw the presentation last night, but actually I had figured that we would talk about, the resiliency plan for at least probably these 2 meetings. And then I believe I had energy action plan in for, whatever, April. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's part of that conversation in April is what is the scope? What is the size? How deep are we going in this? And then I figured that would kind of drive that resource conversation. That was a little bit why I put it in April too, because that's kind of when budget kicks off. So it all seemed to kind of work pretty well that way. But.
Yeah, I'm trying, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
just-
I don't mean to stifle the conversation.
The only reason I brought it up now and not, one, meeting's getting long here, and I'd
Yeah.
like to, but it actually starts addressing that, I think, the third thing in our agenda today, which is kind of what our strategy with that is. And it also helps me to understand personally, if we essentially try to get some of the energy action plan stuff as part of the resilience plan and really focus on supporting Catherine, and maybe focus on supporting a grant or something like that in order to really help that effort, so that we can get some input that with a lot of work done that is part of the energy action plan for the city, which is one strategy we could take. Because there is going to be quite a bit of overlap, especially in the sector of energy.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some overlap, but I she's 6 months left. I'd hate to bog down.
Very
the progress.
specifically, yeah. So,
But
okay.
if I understand too, the intent is to have this position move forward and have continuity in the process with another service member picking up at the same time.
That is correct. Yeah. And so how that looks, we'll know closer to the time.
Sure. Yeah.
We're building in some flexibility. We've also talked about how, taking the pressure off her to solve climate change for us is a plan to plan. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the expectation. It's like there's so much just to consolidate and put together.
Yeah.
As a departure point. And so maybe we get to a point where that next vista is actually writing grants for us to bring in a consulting team. If we decide like this is huge. I mean, it already looks huge, but as it the vulnerabilities that we kind of face and so it's living, hence the living, working, reassessing, keeping all the pieces moving.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking all these questions, is not, we don't need to know all the answers, but they're actually quite important. It's that plan to plan idea. Sarah, we've worked together on a couple of things, and I really try to drive down to how are we going to break this up, and who's doing what, and how much is it going to cost, and what's the scope of what they're doing, what's the scope of what they're doing, because I think until we do that kind of planning, it's going to be hard. It's going to continue to look like, wow, this is just too much. Cool. Any other input? Did you get what you wanted out of this? What we could do for you so far?
Yeah, I think some value from this is just getting this
Yeah.
out of just a project that's in my head into more of a public conversation. That's a big step, as well as just seeing the tools that you have to offer.
Yeah, so to that end, I just encourage maybe can everybody commit, maybe I'm gonna challenge everybody on the conservation board to commit to reaching out with a specific thing that came up during the meeting with Catherine, either a topic follow-up or another, you know, maybe another thing with the resilience plan outline, just something.
Yeah,
Um,
I already have some thoughts in my head that like channels for reaching out for the committee, what do you call it? The
Steering committee.
Steering
Yeah.
committee, thank you.
Yeah, Michael can pass along my email and please like pass along with any ideas, any contacts, any resources.
Yeah,
Any big
And then-
vulnerabilities you see?
yeah, I
Like
look
getting
forward
the heart of
to,
it.
now that I have the document in front of me, just looking it over and thinking about gaps more. I'm a little bit stuck on how, because we're so limited in collaborating outside of this room, happily reach out to you independently. though.
Definitely. And then for a steering committee member, what I've been offering, or like, when I meet with individuals, I ask them if they're interested. And if they ask more about like responsibility that I'm setting so far, it's set in stone, but I've been saying like an hour a month would be a steering committee commitment. Because I think that's what's feasible. And so far as individual roles, that is something that still needs to be worked on, but that time commitment is, that helps for time frame that could expedite that process. That's what I've been saying so far.
Are you thinking 7 people, or is that just the representative categories and it could be like 15 people?
I'm thinking just to not make it too much, like
Yeah.
the top number would be, I think 9 or fewer. I think there can be duplication in those 7 areas, but I think 9 or fewer is a good goal.
So although your city, would be really helpful is partnerships. Do you know of any contacts, organizations that would be interested, like partner, immigrants, doing community cafes, which is kind of a world cafe methodology. I don't know if you've ever been involved in that. Just to host, to present something, to set a context, and just people to reach out to in general. I think seems easy. The county is.
Further out in the county?
Yeah.
Yeah. Katie Weaver. You don't know Katie, I mean, you do know. You
I have
talked
her
to Katie.
contact information. I actually haven't met with her yet, but I have her contact.
That's. Yes, that Katie would be, I would be happy to facilitate the introduction.
Marion Keys is our education partner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Somebody I was already.
she's great,
Yeah.
although
Marianne.
I've only had one meeting with her since she was on maternity leave, but she is excellent in like just kind of being like drilling down, this is the process you need, these are the areas you need, these are the people you need to talk to. And so I've got a wealth of contacts and information direction from her. So I'll continue to be a good partnership.
Mhm. Yeah, basically anybody that's been attached to the Leadership 49 program.
Right.
And running that is a great resource. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. all.
Can we just table other
Yeah.
items?
You betcha.
Um,
I've been waiting a whole year to see this recycling. video.
Oh, you know what, I
There's
this-
no video. We filmed.
we totally filmed, we swear,
That's it.
we swear it exists.
Michael's.
I know.
I was there, but
Lindsay was
then I
there,
never saw.
but she hasn't
Michael's
actually
footage.
seen.
Yeah. I just. kidding.
My kids okay, fine, my kids recorded over the Betamax tape that I use.
But I know you backed it up on laser disc.
Well, of course.
How long is?
Yeah, I think if the hour is
It's
late.
it's late. I mean, this was a great conversation because it was very strategic and aligning and a little messy, but that's okay. You know, we needed to sort of, we needed to do this.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, we could get a motion to adjourn and just continue the items to next meeting. I'd be
Okay.
happy to include them on the next agenda.
Can I just jump in really quickly since I'm not in the room? I'm happy to help how I can. This was a lot of information, so I think I need to like think about it a little bit, but happy to help how I can. And just wanted to confirm that this isn't a hazing thing. You guys will be in that room next month, right? I'm not gonna show up
This
by
is the
myself.
first time we've been here. Ever. I mean.
This was a magic moment, and McKendra, we really have Grant to thank for that. And I would like to publicly thank you again for your support and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this is very motivating for me personally, so I really appreciate.
No, this
it.
was really wonderful. It was a great first meeting for me.
One follow-up question. Faith's invitation says 5:30 to 6:30. The agenda just has a start time and your invitation has 5:30 to 7:30. So just for future planning.
Good point. I think, because we only meet once a month, I really would appreciate it if we could at least try to always carve off 2 hours. I think that's appropriate. When we all get dressed up, we come down to the,
Pants on.
that's right, with our pants on and, no, and we come down to the thing. I think it's worthwhile
Okay.
to just, to always expect a 2-hour meeting. But we will always try to make it short.
On
Great.
that same note, I don't know who to address this to. They're on the Livingston City newsletter, which is great that exists now. It still says the third Wednesday of the month. So there's a little bit of contradictory information out there still.
And
don't
it
know if I
says
can-
5 o'clock. That's why I stopped by really quick on my way home from another meeting.
Oh,
Yeah.
we need evergreen, one resource, right?
Yeah, so, Grant specifically,
I'll clean that up.
we actually just need our bylaws changed, and sorry, this is just in the weeds, but if it truly, if we want to change the time, now's the time.
Oh, I wasn't promoting that necessarily.
Yeah.
Just wanted to know what to plan for.
Yeah.
We should probably agendize this topic for another,
Okay.
but yes, updating the bylaws. I will correct the website and make sure that it's accurate. So we're the second Wednesday at 5:30, correct?
That's what we've been doing.
Okay. That would be.
Though our
updated tomorrow.
bylaws say the third
Wednesday at 5.
Wednesday at 5.
Yeah, everybody else meets the third Wednesday, so I'm having to move people out at third Wednesday, because that's a big, I can't go to 4 meetings in a row.
No, you
3
cannot.
at the same time, so.
Um,
So the second Wednesday works perfectly, I'd say.
yeah,
Mhm.
so, yeah, and then just in terms of time, yeah, I'm sorry, thank you once again, the just always plan on 2 hours unless we say something specifically different.
Sounds good.
And the plan is to meet in person from now on, right?
We will always have a Zoom option.
Okay.
Because there are times when
Yeah.
if somebody's out of town, like in my case, like I'll be, I think next month, that kind of thing, it'd be nice to have participation, but this meeting room and the magic owl is perfect for this. I need a motion to adjourn and put maybe the agenda items to the next agenda.
Again, were you asking or was that a motion?
Can I get a motion?
Oh.
I don't like doing motions as the board chair. I feel like that's,
I'll motion to adjourn and move the agenda items to the next agenda. So, B and C. Thank you.
I will second.
all in favor.
Yeah, I know.
Alicia, thank you for your participation.
Absolutely. Thanks for putting it on the internet so I didn't spread my illness.
Yeah.